What's up, everyone? It's Bones here. With Duelist Nexus just a little over a couple of weeks away, I feel there's no better time to start showing off the new cards, and as usual, we'll be beginning with the cover archetype. Today we'll be showing off the new Synchron cards with a plethora of combos that have a couple of different deck lists for you guys to build ideas from. But anyways, if you're a fan of in-depth combo tutorials and quirky out-of-the-box ideas, then you should consider joining by summoning Stardust Dragon and Cosmic Flaring or Sonic Shooting, whichever version you prefer, those thumbs up and subscribe buttons. To begin, we'll start with Ready, Set, Duel and Tuning, which are the main two searchers of the deck just for your Junk Speeder access, and this still remains Junk Speeder Turbo if you're playing the pure version. And we're going to start here by activating the Ready Set along with the Tuning to get our carrier along with the Junk Synchron. Normal summon the carrier, get the extra normal summon for the Synchron, then go into our Junk Speeder, and Junk Speeder will be able to bring out 5 this time around as we are playing the new level 5. And this one is called Wheel Synchron. It reads, if this card you control is used as a synchro material, you can treat it as a non-tuner. You can only use each of the following effects of Wheel Synchron once per turn. During your main phase, you can immediately, after this effect resolves, normal summon one level 4 or lower monster. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn, except synchro monsters. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one synchro monster you control, reduce its level by up to 4. So while it's technically an extra garnet that you have to play, it's something that's easily discarded by Jet if you do happen to draw it, and it still has a graveyard effect which gives you flexibility in the plays that you can make. You'll see we also have the Revolution Synchron. This one reads, if you would synchro summon a power tool synchro monster or a level 7 or 8 synchro monster, this card in your hand can also be used as material. You can only use this effect of Revolution Synchron once per turn. If this card is in your graveyard and you control a level 7 or higher synchro monster, you can send the top card of your deck to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon this card, but its level becomes 1. You can only use this effect of Revolution Synchron once per duel. So the Revolution Synchron, you'll mainly be using the glow-up bulb effect for it, because on the field, it's basically just what Junk Synchron used to be for this deck, essentially that it's a level 3 tuner, but the really cool one here is the Wheel Synchron, as it's able to be either a tuner or non-tuner, which really gives you a diverse field of options for what you can do, as you'll see momentarily. So we're going to continue here, as we're going to use the effect of the Stardust Synchron, get ourselves the Illumination, go into our Charge Warrior with the Wheel Synchron and the Jet Synchron, and then we can go into our Axel, as we'll use the Axel to bring back the Jet Synchron, activate the Illumination to get our Trail, and from here we can go into our Axel Synchron, as we'll use the Trail in order to get the token, and then use the token and the Stardust Synchron to go into our Hyper Librarian. Tribute the Revolution Synchron to bring back the Stardust Synchron, which will also trigger our Trail, and then from here we can get ourselves the effect of the Axel to tribute it off for the Stardust, then go into our next new card, the Crimson Dragon, which will also net us a couple of draws off of the Hyper Librarian. The Crimson Dragon reads that it takes 1 tuner plus 1 non-tuner monsters, and that's already really good. If this card is special summoned, you can add 1 spell trap that mentions the Crimson Dragon from your deck to your hand. Quick effect, you can target 1 level 7 or higher synchro monster on the field except the Crimson Dragon, return this card to the extra deck, and if you do, special summon 1 dragon synchro monster with the same level as the targeted monster from your extra deck. This is treated as a synchro summon. You can only use each effect of the Crimson Dragon once per turn, and this is another really good effect that will end up being a staple in Synchron decks in my opinion, because of the versatility that it gives decks and allows you to even build your deck differently depending on how you go about it. But we're now going to use the effect of the Hyper Librarian, the Axel Synchron, or the Assault Synchron to get back the Axel, and then we'll also use the Crimson Dragon to get ourselves our next new card, the Scrap Iron Idol, and this one reads, target one of your level 7 or 8 Dragon Synchro monsters that is banished or in your graveyard, special summon it, but return it to the extra deck during the end phase. Also, after that, set this card face down instead of sending it to the graveyard. If this set card in its owner's control is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon the Crimson Dragon from your extra deck. You can only use each effect of Idol once per turn. And I actually happen to think that out of the 3 spell and trap that we got that are searchable off of the Crimson Dragon in this set. I like this one the most just because it gives you the ability to play on your opponent's turn. But we're going to get our draws here, the special summon of the Axel, and then from here we can use the effect of the Axel Synchron to send the Revolution Synchron or the Junk Synchron, doesn't matter, you just want to make it level 2. And now we'll go into our next new card, the Cosmic Quasar Dragon, and this one takes 1 Tuner Synchro Monster plus 2 plus non-tuner Synchro Monsters. Must first be Synchro Summoned with the above Synchro materials. Once per turn, you can target face-up cards on the field up to the number of monsters used as Synchro materials. For this card, +1, negate their effects. The effect's activation and effect cannot be negated. Quick effect, you can banish this Synchro Summoned card, special summon 1 Dragon Synchro Monster from your extra deck that lists 2 or more non-tuner Synchro Monsters as material. This is treated as a Synchro Summon, so this is kind of an easy way to go into something like Cosmic Blazar and stuff like that, which does require more extra deck space, because one thing that I think is becoming kind of obvious now is the amount of extra deck space that we're using. We have the Stardust Dragon for the Axel, we have these two which already add to a packed extra deck that Synchron decks had to play in. In this replay, I actually will not be using its effect because not using it, but of course build your deck however you want to, and if you want to use the effect then by all means. And we're going to use our Wheel Synchron now targeting the Axel, as we'll then be able to revive the Revolution Synchron with its effect, go into our Crystal Wing, and from here we can activate the Jet Synchron, revive it, as we'll then be able to activate the Illumination, change the trail to level 3, which now will go into our Herald. Then we can set the Idol, go on to our opponent's turn, and then during our opponent's turn we can use the effect of the Crimson Dragon to target the Cosmic, then bring out the Hot Red, and this is pretty cool because now we can stop our opponent from playing, and at any point you can use the effect of your Scrap Iron Idol to bring back your Stardust so that you can protect your board from destruction without having to use any of your negations and stuff like that. Now for this next combo we have Junk Converter plus any Synchro or any tuner, and we're going to start here by activating the Junk Converter, get ourselves the Junk Synchron, normal summon the Synchron, get back our Converter, then go into the Speeder. And something else I would like to point out is that it feels like when you're playing the Wheel Synchron, a lot of these combos get better when you don't chain block the Junk Synchron, which leaves you vulnerable to Ash, but at the same time, it allows you to play around Nibiru a little bit better, so it's something of a judgment call that you have to make in regards to that, and I will discuss things about that later in the video. But from here we're going to use the effect of the Stardust Synchron, get ourselves the Illumination, go into our Charge Warrior, get ourselves the draw. From here we can go into our Axel, use the Axel to revive the Jet Synchron, and you'll notice that we're going to revive the Jet Synchron a lot, as we're always going to be able to use the Illumination to bring out the trail so that we can go into our Axel, get the token, and then go into our Hyper Librarian this way. Then we'll go into our Stardust Dragon by tributing the Axel, synchro away into Omega, and something really cool about this version is an Omega interaction that we have with this build, as we're going to use the Hyper Librarian along with the Axel and the trail, get ourselves back the Axel and the trail, then use our Hyper Librarian to get the draws, activate the Illumination in our graveyard to change the level of trail, and from here we can go into our Baron, and then we'll be able to get the draw, use the effect of our Stardust Synchron in the graveyard to tribute off the Axel, then go into our Crimson Dragon, and from here we can get ourselves a draw, use the effect of Crimson Dragon to get ourselves the Scrap Iron Idol. Now we can use the effect of the Crimson Dragon to target the Baron and bring out the Dispatter. So the interaction that I was talking about here is that you can actually use the Omega, rip a card from your opponent's hand, revive it with the Dispatter, and then rip another card out of your opponent's hand while already having a monster negation and an Omni negation. Plus, we've drawn 5 cards and searched 1. So from here, we're going to get another draw, as we'll then be able to use the effect of the Revolution Synchron to revive it, use the effect of Wheel, which will allow us to change the Hyper Librarian to level 1 so that we can bring out the Shaman, then use the Shaman to bring back the Converter, as this will allow us to go into our Herald, and then from here we can use the effect of our Junk Converter to bring back the Axel, and then we'll use the Dispatter to get back the trail, as then from here we're going to go into our Crocosaur, netting us yet yet another draw along with another interruption. And at this point, you don't have to do this, but you can bring back the Jet Synchron and then go into the Chengying if you would like to. But this will basically just round out our end board along with the Scrap Iron Idol set. Now we have another iteration of this combo where we'll be going with the Junk Converter and any tuner, as we're going to get the Junk Synchron, normal summon the Junk Synchron, get back our Converter. Again, we won't be using the Converter so that we can pop off as much as we can. And then we'll get ourselves the 5 Synchrons, as we'll get ourselves the Wheel, the Stardust, the Revolution, the Assault, and the Jet. Use the effect of the Stardust to get our Illumination. Then go into our Charge Warrior, activate the effect for the draw, go into our Axel, revive the Jet Synchron off of the Axel, use our Illumination to bring out the Trail. Then from here we can go into our Axel, use the effect of the Stardust Trail to get the token, go into our Hyper Librarian. Again, a lot of the same things, except this time we're going to use the Axel earlier so that we can go into our Crystal Wing. And then from here we're going to use the effect of our Axel and our Trail to get back our Trail and the Axel, as from here we'll then be able to go into our Baron, use the effect of the Stardust Synchron to tribute off the Axel, then go into our Crimson, use the effect of the Crimson to get ourselves the Search, as we're also going to quick effect target the Baron and then go into our Dispatter, as this will get us the Scrap Iron Idol. Then use the effect of the Jet Synchron or the Revolution Synchron, go into our Crocosaur, get ourselves another draw, as we're then going to use the effect of the Dispatter to bring back the Stardust Synchron. And now we can go into our Omega, as we'll then be able to set the Scrap Iron Idol, go on to our opponent's turn, and then from here we can revive the Crystal Wing to give us the extra disruption for our opponent's turn. Now, I want to move on to the adventure version of the deck, and it's because I do feel it's a pretty interesting one. It deserves some recognition, and we're going to get ourselves the token along with the Fateful, normal summon the Jet, which will allow us to trigger the Fateful for the Draco back, and we can activate the Fateful as we'll be able to get the Illegal Knight, pitch the Draco back, which will equip itself. Now, you can choose to play the Illegal Knight or the Griffin Rider, but because going first you're usually tributing off or synchroing off the Illegal Knight or the Wandering Griffin Rider, there's no point to keep the negate, and going second, this just gives you better options to play into it. That being said, Griffin Rider is still an Omni negate, and it can come up going second while being a lock to stop something that could definitively stop your play. But that is also another judgment call that you will have to make, as we're now going to go into our Axel, use the Axel to revive the Jet. Now we can tribute off the Axel so that we can get a protected Speeder. And now we'll go into our Speeder with the token and the Jet Synchron, and we'll bring out all our 4 Synchrons along with the Assault, and you'll see that we're not going to get our Wheel. There's only so much room that we have, but we'll be able to get ourselves the Search for the Illumination, go into our Stardust Charge Warrior, get ourselves the draw. From here we can go into our Crystal Wing, activate the Illumination, get ourselves the Trail. Now we'll go into our Crimson Dragon, use the effect of the Crimson Dragon to get ourselves the Synchro World. And this is another new card that we'll be getting. Each time a monster is Synchro Summon, place 2 signal counters on this card. You can remove 4, 7, or 10 signal counters from your field to activate one of these effects, or increase or reduce the level of one face-up monster you control by 1. 7, special summon 1 tuner from your graveyard. 10, special summon 1 synchro monster from your graveyard. If this card in its owner's control is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon 1 the Crimson Dragon from your extra deck. So from here we're now going to activate the Synchro World, as we'll be able to use the Jet now, pitching the random card in hand so that we can go into our Axel. From here we can get our tokens, as we'll also be able to use the Trail for the token, revive the Stardust Synchron with its effect. Now we can trigger the Trail in our graveyard to revive it. Then we can go into our Hyper Librarian, get more tokens, as we'll then be able to get ourselves the effect of the Illumination to change the Trail to level 5 so that we can go into our Baron, get more counters on the field spell, get the effect of the Hyper Librarian for the draw, as we'll use the effect of the Crimson Dragon to go into our Bestial Dispatter for more counters along with another draw. Then we'll also be able to get another body with it, as we're going to use the effect of our Synchro World to bring back the Evolution Synchron so that we can go into our Omega Omega or Crystal Wing. The second iteration of the adventure version. We're going to start this one by activating the right. We can get ourselves the token along with the Fateful. As we're now going to normal summon the Jet, a lot of the stuff will be similar to what you saw previously, except we are going to go a different way about it. We're still going to get our Illegal Knight or Wandering Griffin Rider. She'll summon it out so that we can go into our Axel. We can now go into our Speeder, as we'll be able to use its effect in order to get ourselves these 4 special summons. And we'll get ourselves the Stardust, the Revolution, the Assault, and the Jet, as we'll be able to get ourselves the Illumination. Go into our Charge Warrior, get ourselves the Draw, as we'll be able to then go into our Crystal Wing, use the effect of our Stardust, as we'll be able to get the quick synchro for our Crimson Dragon. Then we'll be able to trigger off the Assault Synchron in Graveyard to bring back the Axel along with the Crimson Dragon to get ourselves the Synchro World. Now we can activate the Illumination to bring out the Trail, as we'll then activate the Synchro World. Here we can then use our effect of Jet to get it back, as we'll then be able to use the Jet and the Trail to go into the Axel, get counters, as now we can use the effect of the Trail for the token, use the effect of the Stardust Synchron in Graveyard, tributing off the Revolution so we can go into our Hyper Librarian, get more counters, use the Illumination to change the level of Stardust Axel to 7, bring back the Revolution so that we can then go into our Omega or Crystal Wing, and then you can use the effect of the Hyper Librarian, a draw, as we'll then go into the Baron, use the Synchro World, get more counters along with the Crimson Dragon effect in order to get the Bestial Dispatter out. And this is the best use, I think, for Crimson Dragon that you have, is you're always going to go into Baron, so being able to get a quick Dispatter that way is still pretty nice, as it's also treated as a synchro summon, so you will get a draw if you have the Hyper Librarian on board, and you'll also get counters if you have this on board. So we're now going to use the effect of the Synchro World to bring back a synchro from our graveyard as we get ourselves the Hyper Librarian, and then we're going to use the Dispatter to get back the Stardust Synchron, and now you can go into a level 9 synchro, whether it be Crocosaur or something like Shen, as we'll also be able to get ourselves another draw. Now for this next one, we have Junk Converter plus 100 Apple Dragon, and in this build I actually have a way to search the 100 Apple Dragon, as we are playing Small World, and you'll see that in the deck profile if you happen to actually skip all the way over there. But going to normal summon our Junk Synchron to bring back the Converter, go into the Junk Speeder, as this will allow us to get the 5 special summons. And again, you'll notice that a lot of what I'm going to do is similar. There's just a lot of different things that we can do to make different end boards, which is really where the diverse stuff in Synchro comes from. But we'll be able to use the Axel to get back the Jet Synchron, use the Illumination to get the Trail, as we'll then be able to go into our Axel Synchron, use the Trail to get the token. Here we can go into our Hyper Librarian, use our effect of the Axel to get the Stardust, synchro into our Baron with the Axel and the Heal Synchron, get ourselves the 2 draws off of the Hyper Librarian, bring back the Axel and use the Trail, use the effect of the Stardust Synchron in Grave, as we'll be able to get it back, then go into our Crimson Dragon, a draw along with our search, and we can also chain the Crimson Dragon to bring out the Dispatter by targeting the Baron, as we'll get ourselves the Scrap Iron Idol. And from here we're going to get more draws, as we already have 6 extra cards in hand along with the search of the Crimson Dragon that we got earlier. We're going to bring out the Omega, get another draw, as we'll then be able to use our 100 Apple Dragon now for the token, as we can now go into the Chengying, use the effect of the Hyper Librarian for the draw, then use the Revolution Synchron to glow up bulb itself back, use the Wheel Synchron so that we can change the Hyper Librarian to level 1 into our Shaman. Shaman can then bring back the Junk Converter. We now have access into a level 4 Synchro as we go into the Herald, and the Junk Converter will be able to revive the Junk Synchron, as now we can use the Bestial Dispatter to bring back the Wheel Synchron, and now we can put the Omega back into our extra deck with any random card, and then go back into the Omega. Going back to the adventure version, we have Jet Synchron plus Fateful Adventure, and I will be showing what you can do with a majority of the Synchrons along with Fateful, because they're all kind of different. So we're going to get ourselves the Draco back, use the effect of the Fateful in order to get ourselves the Water Enchantress, pitch the Water Enchantress because we want the right so that we can have access into the Speeder, since we just need a level 4 along with a Synchron Tuner, and the Jet Synchron is a level 1, and the the adventure token is a level 4, so now we can get ourselves the 5 special summons, as we're then going to get ourselves the effect of the Stardust Illumination. You've probably seen this before, as we're then going to go into our Charge Warrior, get ourselves the draw, go into our Axel, use the Axel to revive the Jet Synchron, activate the Illumination, which will bring back the Trail. Now we can go into our Axel, use the effect of the Trail to get back the token. From here we can go into our Hyper Librarian, use the effect of Axel so that we can go into our Stardust, Synchro into our Baron, get ourselves the 2 draws off of the Hyper Librarian along with the Axel and the Trail in the graveyard to get back the 2 bodies. And then from here we're going to get ourselves the draws. We can use the Wheel Synchron to change the level of the Axel to level 5, and then we're going to go into our Crystal Wing with the Revolution Synchron and the Axel, tribute off the Trail for the Stardust Synchron so that we can go into our Crimson Dragon, and now we can get ourselves a draw, use the effects of the Crimson Dragon to search and target the Baron so that we can get our Dispatter, and then we'll be able to get our Scrap Iron Idol, as we'll also get a draw, use the effect of the Dispatter to get back the Wheel Synchron, and then we can revive the Jet with its effect, as this will give us access to go into Crocosaur, then use the Hyper Librarian and the Crocosaur for the draws, go into our Cheng Ying, and then we can set the Scrap Iron Idol, go to our opponent's turn. We have to pitch 2 random cards, as we can then revive the Crystal Wing with the Scrap Iron Idol to round out our end board. Something I would like to keep in mind is that you do want to bring out the Crystal Wing in defense mode, because you don't want it to get talenced away and then your opponent just gets extra damage on board like that. So just something worth mentioning. Assault Synchron with Fateful Adventure, and I'll be starting this one by activating the Fateful. Much like before, we'll be bringing out the Axel so that we can get ourselves the search off of the Fateful for the Draco back, so that we have a discard. But from here, instead of getting the Illegal Knight, we're going to get the Water Enchantress and normal summon it so that we can go into our Junk Speeder, then use the Junk Speeder's effect in order to get ourselves the Stardust Illumination, the Jet Synchron Revolution, Assault Synchron, and the Wheel, and then we can use the Stardust Synchron to get ourselves the Illumination, into our Charge Warrior to get ourselves the draw. Then from here we can go into our Axel, use the Axel to revive the Jet Synchron. Now we can activate the Illumination, get ourselves the Trail. From here we can go into our Axel Synchron, go into our Trail token, as we can trigger it in the graveyard, go into our Hyper Librarian, then use the effect of the Water Enchantress to get ourselves the right. We still haven't used any normal summon effects, so we can activate that at any point, as we're going to tribute off the Axel, go into our Stardust, go into our Baron, get the 2 draws off of Hyper Librarian, as we can then bring back the Axel off of the Assault, and then get the Trail effect to bring itself back, as we're then going to continue to get the 2 draws, use the effect of the Illumination to change the level of the Axel to 7 so that we can go into our Cheng Ying, get another draw off of the Hyper Librarian, use the Stardust Synchron to revive itself, tributing off the Trail so that we can go into our Crimson Dragon. Crimson Dragon will allow us to search, as we'll also be able to get the draw off of the Hyper Librarian. We'll target the Cheng Ying, go into our Dispatter. This time around we're going to get a different new card, Synchro Over the Top, and this is probably the one that will be the least played in my opinion, just because it's kind of awkward for a deck that already has so many ways Synchro Summon and fill its board, especially late in the combo where we're getting this card. You can target any number of level 7 and or 8 Dragon Synchro monsters in your graveyard, special summon them in defense position, but their level become 1 and their effects are negated. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn except Synchro monsters. When your Synchro monster is destroyed by battle, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon 1 Crimson Dragon from your extra deck. You can only use each effect of Synchro Over the Top once per turn. Something else I would like to point out is that all these cards with the Synchro restrictions really only matter for decks outside of Synchrons, because once you go into Junk Speeder, you're already restricting yourself from anything else but Synchro summoning. We're going to get ourselves the 2 extra draws, bring back our Revolution Synchron, use the effect of the Wheel to change the Hyper Librarian to level 2, or to level 1, so that we can go into a level 2. Then we'll bring back the Stardust and the Axel off of Over the Top, and this is kind of like a converter at home, where we're now able to get ourselves access into the Herald, and then we can use the Dispatter to bring back the Wheel, as we'll now activate Rite of Aramesir, and now we can get ourselves the token so that we have access into a level 9 Synchro, get ourselves the the draw off of the Crocosaur, and this will round out our end board. This next one, we have Rite of Aramesir along with the Revolution Synchron, and in my previous video, you may have seen that this could also make Naturia Beast plus Baron, but because this is a Synchron deck, we have Junk Speeder in the extra deck. So we'll now be able to get ourselves the normal summon of the Revolution Synchron along with the search off of the Fateful for the Draco back. We'll then use the effect of the Fateful in order to get our Illegal Knight or the Wandering Griffin Rider, whichever one you want to play. Use the effect of the Draco back along with the Illegal Knight, go into our Baron. From here we can use the Revolution Synchron, revive it, and now we're Nibiru proof, really Ash proof, our Speeder, though we do have to eat up one monster zone, but that's perfectly fine as normally we really are only special summoning 4 names. So we're going to get the effect of the Synchron to get the Illumination, then go into our Charge Warrior, get ourselves the draw. From here we can go into our Axel, revive the Jet Synchron, then activate the Illumination to get ourselves the Trail, much like previous combos. Into our Axel, from here we can use the effect of the Trail to get the token, go into our Hyper Librarian, use the effect of the Synchron in order to tribute the Will, and then get ourselves the Trail effect, which will revive itself, as we can then use the effect of the Axel, tributing off the Stardust Dragon so that we can go into our Crimson Dragon. Here we'll be able to get our 2 draws off of Hyper Librarian along with the Assault that will get back the Axel and the Crimson Dragon, which can target the Baron along with the search that it will be able to get. So we'll get the Dispatter along with the Scrap Iron Idol, revive the Axel, and from here we can get the draws as we'll be able to net ourselves another draw off of the summon of the Dispatter, get ourselves the Illumination as we'll be able to change the level of the Stardust Axel to level 7, and then we're going to change the Axel Synchron to level 1 off of its effect so that we can go into our Crystal Wing, activate the Hyper Librarian for the draw, as now we can bring back the Stardust Synchron with the Dispatter, then go into our Omega. From here we can get ourselves another draw as we'll be able to use the effect of Jet to revive itself. We can use the Wheel in order to make the Hyper Librarian for level 3 as we're going to go into our Herald, set the Scrap Iron Idol, and then we can end our turn on that. For this final combo, and I've been showing a ton of combos that really disregard Nibiru or any hand traps, and I want to give credit to somebody else for this particular combo. I'll link them down below. I think that their channel was called like NW or something. If you want to check out their stuff, I recommend it if you're a fan of Synchrons, as they've been absolutely killing it on their channel. We're going to now use the effect of the Junk Converter to send the Stardust Synchron, get ourselves the Junk Synchron, normal summon the Junk Synchron to get back the Converter. From here we can then go into our Speeder, then we'll use the Speeder to get ourselves the 5 names, as we're then going to get ourselves the effect of the Stardust Illumination as turn priority, and then our opponent is going to hit us with the Nib, which will tribute all of our monsters. Now, because we have the access to the Illumination, we're not completely dead yet, as we're able to send the Trail off of the Illumination and then use the Stardust Synchron to tribute the token, and this will allow us to bring back the Trail, as from here we're then able to go into our Axel, then use the effect of the Axel along with the Trail, which will allow us to get a token and the Jet Synchron. We go into the Shaman, we can now use its effect along with the Jet Synchron in order to Junk Converter, and then we'll special summon out the Converter in hand along with the one in graveyard, use the effect of the Revolution Synchron so that we have access into our Hyper Librarian, use the Converter to bring back the Stardust Synchron, which is why you want the Stardust Synchron in hand for this combo. Then tribute off the Stardust Axel for its effect, go into our Stardust so that we can go into our Crimson Dragon. We can get ourselves the 2 draws off of the Hyper Librarian along with the revival of the Stardust Axel with the Assault. Get ourselves the search for the Scrap Iron Idol, as we'll then be able to get ourselves the draw here, go into our Baron, use the effect of the Hyper Librarian along with the Crimson Dragon targeting the Baron, go into our Dispatter, get ourselves the draw along with another draw for the Crimson Dragon effect, then we'll use the effect of the Dispatter to bring back the Stardust Synchron, then use the effect of the Illumination to change the level of the Stardust Synchron to level 3 or 5, then we can go into our Crystal Wing here or our Cheng Ying or whatever else you want to go into, and then we can set our Scrap Iron Idol along with popping the Nibiru token so that opponent doesn't get to keep it, and we'll be able to end our turn on that. Of the combos out of the way, we can finally get onto the deck list. As you see, there were not only a ton of new cards, but a ton of new lines and a ton of new opportunities that this deck has, as it even has the opportunity now to go into the Merry Melfies instead of the Herald of the Arclight so that you can revive the Evolution Synchron with its own glow-up bulb effect, and then go into the Naturia Beast. But as you see, we're playing a ton of extra deck cards that I feel that we really need. The Crocosaur can be either Cheng Ying or a Shenshen or Charles if you want to play some weird equipped version of the deck, but I think Crocosaur is probably the better one just for the extra draw. We have stuff like Metal Marcher and the Shaman, which is things that you want to have in the extra deck for post Nibiru or post other hand traps. A lot of other staples that we use on our end board or in between our combos that make me feel like the Cosmic along with the Blazar and the Hot Red is just too much extra deck space to invest in if we don't even want to invest on something like this. That being said, depending on the build and how you adjust your main deck, can change that, but for this particular build, I just didn't feel it was correct. You'll also notice that if there's any problem that this deck still kind of has right now, is the fact that there's so many tuners, but not enough non-tuners. We only have the junk converters along with the trail, and then we have our Bystials, so that is something to keep in mind, and it's also why we play the Small World. Small World is also able to bridge you into your 100 Apple Dragon through the junk converter, which is also kind of cool. Outside of that, a lot of it is the same as it used to be. You're really just focusing more on the Crimson Dragon line than anything else. You're also able to do a little bit more post Nibiru or post hand traps with the wheel Synchron, as it just has a ton of effects that give the deck extra versatility, and the revival effect of the Revolution Synchron can come up as well when you consider there's things like Jet that can also revive itself, the body, so that you can tribute off for the Stardust Synchron and stuff like that. Outside of that, I really don't have too much else to say about the pure build that I didn't show off in the combo, so I'll get onto the card by card before showing off the adventure version. And we have the 3 Stardust, the 3 Junk Synchron, the 2 Axel or the 2 Assault, the 1 Carrier, the 1 Wheel, the Revolution Synchron, Jet Synchron, Rhoda, Idol, Illumination, the Stardust Trail, Junk Converters, the 100 Apple, the 2 Small World, the 3 Tuning, the 3 Ready Set, the 1 Thrust, the 2 Balance, the 3 Bystial package, which is the Druis Worm, Baldrake, and the Magna Hut, and then we have the 3 Bell and the 3 Ash to round out the main deck. Onto the extra deck, we have the Shaman, Marcher, Herald, Hyper Librarian, Axel, Junk Speeder, Charge, Stardust, Axel, Crystal Wing, Omega, Crocosaur, Baron, Dispatter, and Crimson Dragon to round out the extra deck. Other things I would like to point out are that this deck is still weak to Dark Ruler. You are running through your extra deck resources, and Nibiru is still a potential problem if you don't have the right hand. You can play an Overtake version if you would like to. I just don't know what that would look like in an extra deck so stuffed like this one is. And you still have the extra weaknesses of Dimensional Barrier and Anti-Spell, which can also be strengths for you if you want to side them in when you go first. With that, I'll take you on to the adventure list. This doesn't look too much different, but there is some things that are worth pointing out. Since we don't have the Small World as we're playing the adventure stuff, we do need the slots for that, meaning that we also had to make other cuts, the 100 Apple Dragon. That being said, you still have the space to go second, which is decent, but maybe I would suggest going over 40 because you're playing the adventure bricks, you have your 1 of Synchron names. You'll notice that I'm only on the 1 Assault Synchron, and I would maybe suggest playing 1 Assault Synchron on the other version too. The other version plays the 2 Assault Synchron because of Small World. Reason being is because usually you're bringing this out of Junk Speeder, and if you hard draw it, you can just special summon it with its effect. It's not like you're going into any other type of extra deck monster besides Synchro Summoning. Just felt that was worth noting. The 2 Revolution Synchron because I feel it's better with the Rite of Aramesir compared to the Assault. Same with the 2 Jet Synchrons, so that these 2 are much better in the adventure build compared to the pure build. We still have the ability to play the 3 Ready Set and the 3 Tuning with the 3 Right, and technically 3 copies of the Water Enchantress with the Foolish, which can send the Water Enchantress. So there's a lot of consistency for this deck to go around. You really do just have to be careful with drawing all the 1-ofs, which can make the deck feel somewhat like maybe Heroes, where sometimes you just draw the nuts and then other times you're just kicking yourself because you drew everything that you play at 1 because you don't want to draw them. Other things that I didn't go over in the previous build were things like the red supernova dragon. This is another level 12 that's easier to make than this that you can play if you do want to play the hot red. There's also the satellite warrior with quick synchro cards like the shamisen and the formula synchron. I feel like this just requires more extra deck space, but it's just another option you have. Of course, there's the Wandering Griffin Rider if you don't want to play the Illegal Knight. Really kept everything else the same because this is the way that felt I liked it the most. Now, I will say that if there are flex spots in the extra deck, you do want to play the Cosmic along with the Hot Red and stuff like that. The cards that I feel I go into the least or that I really don't need to go into are the Metal Marcher, which really only comes up if you're interrupted a lot, and then you have the Crystal Wing, can usually be another level 10 that you make, like the Cheng Ying. Those are really only the two slots that I would mess around with, and the Crocosaur, I do feel like level 9s are now mandatory in the Synchron deck because there's just too many chances where you can make them, can even become synchro fodder for other level 10s via the Jet Synchron Revolution Synchron that can revive itself as a level 1. If you're going to cut this, is something that you lose out on, but those are the three slots I would say that you would probably have to move if you really wanted to play the Cosmic along with the Hot Red and the Blazar or whichever else you want to summon off of the Cosmic Quasar Dragon. All of that out of the way, I'll get onto this card by card so that we can finish up the video. And we have the 3 Stardust Synchron, the 2 Jet Synchron, the 1 Carrier, the 2 Revos, the 1 Assault Synchron, the 3 Ready Set, the 1 Scrap Iron Idol, the 1 Wheel Synchron, the Illumination, Trail, the 3 Rights, the 2 Waters, the 1 Foolish, Illegal Knight, Fateful, Dracoback, the 3 Tunings, 3 Talons, Magna Hut, Baldrake, Druis Worm, 3 Bells, 3 Ash. Onto the extra deck, we have the Shaman, Metal Marcher, Herald, Hyper Librarian, Axel, Speeder, Charge Warrior, Stardust, Axel, Omega, Crystal Wing, Crocosaur, Baron, Dispatter, and Crimson Dragon to round out the deck profiles. So for everyone who's made it this far, I'd like to thank you for watching and for the 500 plus subs. I truly appreciate your support. We've monetized the channel, giving us access to supers and memberships, which means more awesome stuff is on the horizon. To get the channel membership, just click on the description below and there will be a link that takes you there. You'll also notice a free Discord link that I've made for us too. If you want to support me as a content creator, even if you can't donate supers or get a membership for the channel, clicking on those thumbs up and subscribe buttons help a lot too. For those wondering, I do plan on making updates to the channel as the support on the channel grows. But anyways, I hope to see you on the next one. It's Bones, signing out.